Hey guys, Dhru Bee here with Nine Leadership. Today we're going to talk about white privilege. Spoiler alert, it's real. White privilege. There's a lot of talk about that right now. I wonder why. What's going on in the world that's causing white privilege to be a really common topic? Oh yeah, right, racism. So here's why it's a real thing. First, let's examine what white privilege is and why people are kind of denying it. White privilege is the idea that people of lighter skin color, primarily white people, are treated differently in society, treated more favorably by society. People who are white and people who are black, by the way, and all colors in general, just by default, by the look of their skin. Now, this has been proven by multiple studies over the years, including the one study with children where they selected different kinds of dolls, and they associated darker dolls with not being beautiful and lighter skinned dolls with being beautiful. Now that kind of thing breaks your heart, but they weren't infants.
And which one is the white doll?
That one.
Which doll is the pretty doll? Which doll is the nice doll? Which doll is the bad doll? Which doll is the nice doll? And which doll is the bad doll? And why is that doll pretty?
Because he's white and he has two eyes.
Which doll is the ugly doll? Why is that doll ugly?
Because he's black.
You take that back a little bit further to younger children, and that bias wasn't there. That bias was created somewhere between the age of 2 and 3 and the age of like 6 or 7. So obviously something's happening in that period of time where that's happening to people, to kids, at that young age. But it's happening across the world. It's not even just a United States problem only. It is very much here in the U.S. It's very prevalent here. It's most obvious here, and sometimes, most times, and it's being tackled most obviously here. But it's been an issue for a long time elsewhere as well. If you go back in time to when Europe was colonizing essentially the world, they established these ideas in their minds that lighter is better, that white people were superior, or people with lighter skin were superior because they typically had lighter skin than the countries and the people that they were dominating around the world and subjugating and colonizing. And so it's the whole Colonizer Syndrome. I think Colonizer Syndrome might be a little more appropriate name for it over white privilege. Maybe people will get less upset about that one because it's, I guess, a little bit less politically charged. But that's really kind of what it is. It's still white privilege, but it's also kind of Colonizer Syndrome. Because at the same time, you have this idea that because someone's skin is lighter, they're better. India and the entire Asian subcontinent has been plagued by this idea for centuries, essentially, at this point, where they've created these skin creams. They've created a whole culture around lighter skin being associated with divinity and darker skin being associated with lower caste. And caste is not a main concept here, but it's just an idea of lower class people who are worth less. Now, you come here to the US, and it was actually written into the law for a long time. How crazy is that? These parallels exist, but we're only looking at it really from one lens. Now, the reaction of white people has been typically that they don't have white privilege. And their argument a lot of times is stuff like, oh, I didn't get a job that one time I applied, and that's not white privilege because I would have gotten every job I applied for. Not exactly. If you're up against another white person, probably not going to get the same job. One of you has to lose, and that doesn't mean that you don't have white privilege. Secondly, if you happen to be up against someone of color who's way better than you in terms of their great GPA, their schools, their accomplishments, they're probably going to get that job, hopefully, but they have to work that much harder to get it, to be visible, to be able to have that one leg up on you as a white person. The other concept that people are upset about with white privilege is saying that doesn't exist is because you have these programs, like racial equity programs and affirmative action. People are saying that white privilege doesn't exist because those programs exist. That's actually counterintuitive. Those programs exist because white privilege exists. They need those programs. We need those programs because of white privilege. Because otherwise, people of color would not get those jobs. They would not get those positions. Now, Are they executed perfectly every single time? Probably not. But we want to make sure that those people of color are being looked upon as favorably as the white person with the white privilege. You look at things as basic as getting jobs, as hailing a taxi cab, as having conversations with people out in the open, at a bar or in the street, things like that, or needing help on the street sometimes, dealing with police officers. Often people of color are looked upon as being dangerous first, and then they have to prove themselves that they're not a threat, whereas white people have the opposite. They're looked at as being safe until they prove otherwise. Situations like what happened in St. Louis, I believe it was, where that couple took out their guns and pointed them at protesters who were just walking down the street, but they destroyed the gate, broke into their gated community, and were walking down the street to protest to the mayor's house. They took out their guns and were pointing them at the protesters, because protesters were primarily black. Now I ask you this question. What would have happened if those protesters were all white instead of all black? Do you think they would have reacted the same way? If you doubt white privilege exists, look at that and tell me that that's the case. As you consider that, and other situations like it, look at the way not just black people have been treated, but Asians. Their portrayal in the media, in movies, TV. Take the movie Extraction, for example. That got a lot of heat because of the way that it was portraying the white savior complex idea. Now, actually, I think that was one of the less egregious examples of the white savior situation, because it did actually portray people from India as somewhat being competent in what they could do, which is pretty impressive, and probably the first time they've done that in a long time, if ever, in American cinema. But it still got a lot of heat because the whole idea was, oh, Chris Hemsworth is a white guy, so he's the white savior, and only he can save this Indian kid. That's a topic for a different day. But at the end of the day, that conversation has to happen, where you're asking yourself, is a white person, by virtue of being white, more worthy to wield a gun, more capable to have a conversation, more cool or more relaxed or more competent in life than any person of any other color? The answer is no. The answer is that there's a continuum in every race of people who have challenges, more challenges, and people who have less challenges. In every race. There's some people who are extremely wealthy, extremely well-spoken, extremely intelligent, extremely hilarious, of all races. And there are also people who are very, very poor, people who are struggling through life, people who are not as intelligent, people who have a lot of challenges in every race as well. And if you take those people and you put them into categories based on race, then you're doing them disservice. You're doing disservice to everybody who exists in this country and in the world. Now, does that mean white privilege is bad? Not necessarily. Nothing is bad or good. It's just kind of how we use it. It's a thing right now that we need to overcome. And the only way we can overcome that is by engaging people with the privilege to help us overcome that. And by us, I mean society as a whole. Because in the long term, it's not going to benefit anyone to exist that way. There's always going to be tension between the races if that exists, and it continues to perpetuate. So how do we stop it? Well, people with white privilege can step in. They're much more able to step in without being judged or without being called out for being biased and seeing things where there aren't things. So if you're a white person out there watching this and you know you have white privilege, use that to your advantage. You see someone in a restaurant who's a person of color who's getting seated after people who arrived after that person who might be white. Say something. Speak up. It happens all the time, believe it or not. People get passed up all the time. Lines are a famous example for that. But there's other examples too. The whole George Floyd situation, frankly. You have people who stood by, police officers who stood by and watched as this guy was killed. I'm not going to discuss right now whether criminal history existed or whatever. Obviously, he had a criminal history, but does that mean he deserves to die? Probably not. Probably not. Not at all. So, as a white person standing by, or as a white police officer standing by, you can do something about that. You can speak up. Now, a person of color who speaks up or tries to do something might be and probably will be looked at a lot more threateningly and be dealt with a lot more viciously than a white person will. That happens in most situations. Not all, absolutely not all, but most. So as a white person with white privilege, speak up. Use your privilege for good. I hope this video was valuable to you guys out there. Maybe not necessarily liked it, but I hope you guys at least appreciated the content. If you did, hit the like button, hit subscribe. If you want to get notified of future videos as we publish them, please hit that bell. Stay tuned for the next video. Talk to you guys in a couple days. Take care and stay safe.